The Honourable Jim Prentice, former Member of Parliament from Calgary, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. And you know how he described himself the day he suddenly resigned his cabinet post? Plain old Jim.
It's time for me to pursue new opportunities outside of public life.
So, plain old Jim was born in South Porcupine in Northern Ontario. His dad, Eric, actually played for the Leafs in the 40s. Jim went down the mines in the summers to pay for university, and he worked as a lawyer before being elected as an MP in 2004. And from there, he worked his way up to government, Minister of Indian Affairs, Minister of Industry, Minister of Environment. Now, his career was not free from controversy. He has been criticized for abandoning the Kelowna Accord, a Liberal plan to improve the lives of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Also, for introducing contentious copyright legislation.
Canada's new copyright law carries high political and commercial stakes.
This is a unique made-in-Canada approach to copyright reform.
And for what some critics see as an environmental policy that overly favored the energy industry.
Balancing responsibility is why environment is now an economic portfolio.
Now, he resigned in 2010, lured by the siren call of the private sector, and his new job is with CIBC, where he's a senior executive. Now, we'll ask him about the optics of that kind of jump and whether the decisions he made in government have helped or hindered him in his new role. Please welcome the Honourable Jim Prentice. Good to see you, man.
Nice to be here. Great. Nice to be on your show.
So, you get to still be called the Honourable. That's got to be fun.
I do, but better than that, I get to say congratulations tonight because you, George, have been recognized as one of the young leaders on the planet under 40 years old for your contribution to humanity and all the great work that you're doing. So on behalf of everybody,
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. As much as it's really exciting to be part of this, I'm just really excited about the young in the category. I think I'll live with that for the rest of my life. So you're on the other side. What's that like? Going back to private sector.
So one more guy over the fence.
Yes, that's right.
It's great. I love it. It's back to the private sector, and I loved my time in politics, but it was time for me to do something else.
You spent about 10 years, right?
10 years in politics.
Yeah. Is it like a relationship where you know it's over before it's actually over?
I think you feel it in your heart maybe before other people see it, and you know it's time to start to go. And I had a view that I wasn't a professional politician. I was there to make a contribution to the country and to leave when the time was right. So I could feel it and decided it was time to move on.
Are you the kind of guy that has a job set up before you go? Like, did you know CIBC was where you were going to go?
I had received a call, and so that sort of crystallized some thinking about it. But, you know, the very first speech I gave in politics when I ran, it was like awful because I couldn't speak at all. I said, I'm in this for 10 years. I'm going to make a contribution for 10 years, and then it's back to other things.
I suppose you learned a lot about the country as a politician that you wouldn't have known before. What was the biggest surprise to you about who we are as Canadians?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. Well, I think it's the stuff that goes on right across the country. I mean, it's the magic of the North and the incredible things that are going on there. I guess what a compassionate country we are right across. I mean, and how proud people are of Canada. We don't wear it on our sleeves, but I'll tell you, people in this country, as you go across from one end to the other, they're pretty passionate about being Canadians. And you really see that. You see it in small places in small ways. And I think we sometimes undersell ourselves for that.
You also were, a big part of dealing with land claims.
I spent a lot of time negotiating claims, and I go back 25 years in that.
And the First Nations conversation has, I think, it's been a really interesting version of the conversation these days in the media. I think Ottawapisket helped crystallize it for a lot of people, and now you see a real push. There's a lot of great leaders in the community that are doing this. In government,
right.
What was that experience like trying to, as a guy who understands it, trying to get to a place where you think that we could do right in that conversation?
Well, it's interesting you mention that because I look back on my career and the different portfolios I had, and probably the one that over time is taking on the most meaning is having been the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development. And it was like the toughest job ever when I was there. But I look back now at things like negotiating the residential school agreement, being in the House of Commons beside the Prime Minister when the apology was offered, agreements on land claims. I mean, they're really meaningful things because you can actually do stuff.
Did you push for the apology?
Yes. Yeah. And that together with another moment in the House of Commons was probably the most moving thing that I've ever been through as a politician.
What was the other one?
It related to the whole situation with the Japanese and the Chinese apology relating to the head tax, actually. And that was also an apology offered by the Prime Minister, taking us back 100 years in Canadian history. And those two moments were undoubtedly the most moving moments that I'd ever experienced in the House.
How do you get it past the symbol, though? How do you actually get to a place where we expedite the sort of change that's necessary that a lot of people feel just isn't there? They felt like they were on the route with Kelowna, the Kelowna Accord, but...
Right. Well, there's lots of work to be done. You know, as a compassionate country, there's a lot of work to be done. We have to focus on education, I think. You know, Inuit children, we're getting less than 20% of our Inuit children through high school. First Nation children, probably about 50%. To me, it's all about leadership, it's about education, and making sure that those young people have the same opportunities that my kids and grandkids have.
This is a question that I posed similarly to Paul Martin, former Prime Minister, and Jean Chrétien. For a guy who was in government for 10 years, it's not a surprise that education is important. How come it doesn't happen?
Well, I think it's starting to happen now. I think we're starting to make, we made some of the investments in the schools, but I think we're starting to get more of a school system in place that works, that is acceptable to First Nations and Aboriginal communities, that is going to get the job done. But listen, there's lots to be done, and you know, if you travel to some of the poorest communities in this country and see how some Canadian citizens are living, it's very moving.
A big part of the conversation surrounding that is what happens with business development and energy development around their communities. And you know, communities are being poisoned, and there are a lot of huge eco impacts that are happening there. How do you do these mega projects and actually be respectful to the people who live in these areas? Well,
for sure, you've got to have first-class environmental rules in place, and you have to make sure that any projects that go ahead are sound environmentally. I mean, that's part of who we are as a country. And from there, you've got to make sure that there's economic opportunity for the folks that live nearby, Aboriginal communities and others. But, you know, a lot of the projects that are now happening, hydro projects in this country that are environmentally sound, they involve First Nation partners. And so, you know, it's great to see that happening. I remember 25 years ago when there was even more poverty, and I used to meet First Nation leaders, and we traveled together across the country, and we said the day would come when these kinds of projects would have First Nation partnership, and today they do. You know. Can you do environmentally responsible and allow business to do what business needs to do? Yeah, I think so. These mega projects, these big energy mega projects, can you do both? I think you can. I think that's actually part of the genius of our country, is that we can be responsible, we can strike a balance. It may mean you say no to some projects. I was involved in some of those situations. But it also means that you can take projects that are good and bring them on with conditions that make sure that they're socially acceptable and give social license to them. What does it mean to you to be a conservative? What is a conservative politician to you? Well, I think there's a lot of history in this country about being a conservative. It takes you right back to Sir John A. Macdonald. But I think at this point, I think a conservative is someone that's passionate about the economic future of the country, the opportunity that affords for our kids and our grandkids, wants to see the country as a country that welcomes new Canadians. Somebody would say calling it a company was a Freudian slip. As a country that welcomes new Canadians and builds an exciting, dynamic country that means something on the world stage. So I believe in all that, and I think those are conservative values. During question period, if somebody was going on and you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister, are you guys cracking jokes? There was the odd joke. I used to sit beside Peter MacKay. There was the odd joke cracked, but depending on the solemnity of what was going on in the House. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of camaraderie. There has to be, so that you can survive that sort of stuff. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Nice to be on your show. I appreciate it. Congratulations. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The Honourable Jim Prentice. We'll be right back.